we're in a series called the Red Letter Road Trip, and we've been traveling the entire summer, just following closely the steps of Jesus, looking and examining his words, his ways, his will. And I hope you've been joining us, specifically traveling through the four Gospels, the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are four different vantage points of the life and ministry of Jesus. And I know I'd just be reinvigorated reading some of the stories that I've read before, but seeing something new. And we're gonna jump in today. And today we're talking about, if you've ever been on a road trip, you've probably encountered some roadblocks. We're talking about roadblocks today. Now we've studied some of the places Jesus went, some of the miracles that he's done. I want to talk about some of the places Jesus couldn't go. Some of the places that had some limiting factors on the supernatural power of Jesus working in specific cities and the lives of specific people. Last Thursday night, Drew, there's a men's small group that meets on Thursday nights and they play basketball. And my son Drew goes, it's every other Thursday night, and he's been trying to get me to go, but these guys start their small group at 9:30 at night. Yeah, I didn't know 9:30 came twice in one day. I'm asleep at like 9 o'clock at night. And so Drew's been trying to get me to go, and I'm like, Drew, I can't even hardly stay up that late, much less try to play basketball at 9:30 at night. But last Thursday, he's so persuasive, he got me to finally get in the car. We get over there, and the one night that I finally go to the men's basketball small group, it's canceled. So I've driven out to Rancho Cucamonga to the gym there, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Well, there was a few other guys that they apparently didn't get the memo either, so we just kind of sat around. We had a little small group right there for about 30 or 40 minutes, and then by now it was about 10:30, and of course I'm getting really tired, and so we hop in the car, and Drew and I get on the 10 freeway, and we're coming up to the 10 and the 15 interchange, and wouldn't you know it, they're doing construction, and they have shut down the entire interchange. So we've got to get off the freeway, take side roads. We finally get back on the 10 freeway. It's about a 20-minute detour. It's almost 11 o'clock, and now I'm just like, God, keep me awake. I need to get home. I want to go to sleep. And we get down about another 8 or 9 miles where the 215 interchange is with the 10 freeway. And wouldn't you know it, there was a massive accident, and literally they had shut down the entire 10 freeway. So we get off there and we drive up into San Bernardino, we go up around the interchange, and we finally get home. But I was thinking about, life sometimes throws you some roadblocks, right? Sometimes you weren't expecting some road closures in your life. And actually in Jesus' ministry, as much as he was moving around and we're following this road trip of his, there were some roadblocks in Jesus' ministry. I want to kind of talk to him today in terms of there were some limiting factors to what Jesus was able to do. And I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about limiting factors. We're all familiar with limiting factors in life, right? You think about vehicles, for example. On some commercial vehicles, they actually put governors on those vehicles that limits the speed that they can go. Institutions like businesses, they sometimes have limiting factors that keep them from experiencing their full potential. It may be a shortage in the workforce. We experienced that during COVID, a shortage of materials. Sonia and I are trying to buy some patio furniture. Has anybody tried to buy patio furniture lately? Like, you just can't get it. There's just such a shortage of material, lack of supply, lack of demand, lack of skilled workforce. These become limiting factors in a business reaching its full potential. You personally have some limiting factors in your life. You have some, maybe in your leadership or whatever, you have some leadership lids, you have some capacity issues that limit you from reaching your full potential. And as Jesus is here and he's doing life and ministry for 3.5 years, there were times in his ministry, as much as some incredible things were happening, there were times in his ministry where he experienced some limiting factors to his power at work in people's life. Let me clarify. It wasn't that his power, that he had limited power, is that his power was limited. Okay, we know that God is all powerful. Jesus is God incarnate, God in flesh. He's all power. All power was given to Jesus. That's why as he's walking around, he's performing incredible miracles. The blind will see, the deaf will hear. He's raising people from the dead. It wasn't that Jesus had limited power, but there were certain times that his power was limited. And I'm sharing this with you today because I believe we can learn from some of these situations. We're gonna follow one particular town that Jesus went to where his power was limited. I think we can learn from it and make sure that we're not putting some limitations on God's power in our life. So go with me to Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6, verse 1. Jesus left there, now watch this, and he went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Anybody that heard Jesus speak during his time, to this day, if you study, I love it. Last week we were talking about some of the words of Jesus, and it literally is, you'll marvel at the teachings of Jesus. To this day, people still marvel at his teaching. And they said, where did this man get these things? They asked. They said, what's the wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles that he is performing? And then watch this, their tone changes in the conversation. They said, wait a minute, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't these his sisters that are here with us? And this is something I had never seen until just recently rereading this story. They actually took offense at him. So Jesus said to them, Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. I remember Jesus went to his hometown. He's visiting his family, his closest friends, the people that he was raised around, the people that were in closest proximity and relationship to Jesus. Jesus tells him, a prophet's without honor, except in his own town, among his relatives, his own home. And this is so sad. This is Nazareth, Jesus' hometown, where you would think Jesus' ministry would have just exploded. Like this is where this was meant to be like the epicenter of Jesus' ministry. And the scripture says he could not do many miracles there, except lay hands on a few sick people and heal them. And lastly, he said he was amazed at their lack of faith. And so Jesus in Nazareth, his hometown, again, he's doing miracles all over the place. The book of John at the end of John's gospel says that Jesus did so many miracles that all the books of the library of the world could not contain him. I mean, in 3.5 years, Jesus literally, he turns the world upside down. Even his own people, they marvel and say, where does the wisdom come from that this man is sharing from? How is he able to perform such great miracles? And yet in his hometown, he could only do a few miracles. He laid hands on a few people that were sick were healed. And I was looking at this, I'm like, I wanted to just pause. And I really just was reading through this because I don't know about you, but I don't want to put limiting factors on the power of God working in my life, in my family, in my sphere of influence, in my business, in my relationships. I want to be aware, God, is there something in me that is somehow limiting your power at work in my life? And so I want to walk through here, and I want to show you three things, three limiting factors that the city of Nazareth possessed that kept Jesus from doing many miracles. And some of them probably each of us have in our life today, and it may be what is limiting God from doing what he wants to do and his power from being in full effect in your life today. Number one, and this is the part that just struck me as I was reading, in Mark 6:3 it says, and they took offense at him. They took offense at Jesus. How many of you have ever been offended? Okay, the rest of you are lying. Because every single one of us have been, how many of you had somebody say something that hurts you, right? I mean, they say sticks and bones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. That's a lie. Words pierce deep. I have been offended by something that somebody said. I mean, have you been in close relationship and you felt like somebody betrayed you? And you were offended. Like this is a big word. This is a deep word, because if you've ever dealt with offense, you know the kind of pain that offense brings into your life. You know how hurtful and painful and this becomes, for some of us are carrying childhood wounds today from offense in our life, from something somebody did, something happened in your upbringing, your environment, or somebody that maybe took advantage of it. You're carrying around an offense today. You know how deep, how painful that can be. The people that are closest to Jesus see him doing these miracles, sharing this incredible wisdom, and their response is they are offended at Jesus. This becomes one of the limiting factors from Jesus doing incredible miracles in the city of Nazareth was their offense. And I've seen this happen to people. I've seen this happen to people with Jesus. People get offended. They get offended at God. I mean, have you ever been offended at God? Like, God didn't meet your expectations. A lot of times people get offended. People get offended in relationships because they've set certain expectations and somebody didn't meet that expectation. And a lot of times, to be honest with you, there are unrealistic expectations that you've set that people don't live up to and you've been offended. Well, they had some expectations of Jesus and he didn't meet them. And he offended them. And they're carrying around, and it may sound crazy, but there's probably people here today, you may be offended at God. You may be, how many of you have ever been hurt by the church? Some of you are not brave enough to admit it, but I'm gonna tell you, more than likely, probably every single one of us here at one point have been offended at the church. Now, I have a little bit different vantage point of offense within the church, because let me just first say, I'm sorry that the church hurt you. And I mean that, because I know some of you have been hurt by the church. The church is not perfect. It's hurt people. You look at the history of the church, it's been abusive at times. It's hurt people. But the truth is, the only people that can hurt you are the people that you love the most. And so people come into the church, they're part of the church is a family. This is the family of God. If you've been around the church long enough, you've probably started to grow some really deep relationships with people. They may not have been your blood family, but they're your family. When you read the scripture, it begins to describe how we are and interact in our relationships with the church. He says, we are brothers and sisters in Christ. Probably some of the deepest hurt and offense you've had have come from a family member. Am I right? The truth is, nobody can hurt you like the people that you love the most. And these are people, they were raised around Jesus. They were in close proximity with Jesus. They were family to Jesus. Jesus offended them. That's what happens within the church. In some ways, I know this sounds crazy. In some ways, I'm like, man, that's a testimony to how beautiful the church is. That people can grow so close in relationship that they can be hurt so deeply. Because only the people that you love and that love you the most are the ones that can really hurt you to the point that you are probably carrying around an offense. But I want to share this with somebody today. If you're not careful, your offense will become a defense to God working in your life. A defense to the supernatural power, working power of God in your life. And I've watched this. I've watched people that have offense, and it's like literally putting a fence around God trying to work in their life. I was at the Rose Bowl last night. Went to my first ever soccer game, Real Madrid, and I think it said Juventus. Am I saying that right? We would say Juventus, but I know that's not how you say it. I think it's Juventus. And there was 90, I think it was record, like 90-something thousand people. It was going crazy. And afterwards, I was talking about the people we were with. We just stayed in the parking lot because there was so much traffic. And we were talking about environments within stadiums that we've been to. And I love the Rose Bowl. If you've ever been to a soccer game, by the way, it's crazy. Like, it's loud. You hear buzzing the whole time. Like, people are serious about their sport. Personally, I'm more of a basketball fan. And my favorite place to watch a basketball game is Staples Center. I know they call it crypto.com, but to me, it's still the house that Kobe built to me, okay? It's Staples. Any Kobe fans here today? Like, it's still the house that Kobe built. And there is nothing like the environment. Fourth quarter, towards the end of a game, Lakers, Celtics, the big rivalry. It's a tie ball game and we're going basket, and all of a sudden you'll see a fan jump up in the crowd and he's got a sign like this, right? A couple of them. And if you've been, you know it. And all of a sudden there's a chant that starts going. You ready? You want to do this with me? You ready? Defense. 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 Defense, right? And we're trying to energize the Lakers. We didn't do a very good job last year because they picked up Russell Westbrook, and all he knows is offense. He doesn't know defense. But we did our dead level best, and the crowd those nights, and we were chanting, and we're trying to get our team to do everything in their power to block the other team from scoring that game-winning point. Listen to me this morning. Your offense becomes a defense. And you know about offense, it is heart pounding. It is gut wrenching, and you can feel the pain and the agony of that offense. And you know what it's doing? It's riling up inside of you, and it's trying to get you to put up your fences, and it becomes a defense, and it blocks God from sometimes scoring the winning point in your life. There's a saying in sports, and they say the best offense is a good or the best defense is a good offense. You ever heard that? And I was thinking about that this week. I was like, wow, isn't that true in life? The best defense in your life from experiencing all that God has for you is just let a good offense come in your life. Let somebody offend you. Let God offend you. Let the church offend you. And I'll tell you what, it becomes the best defense to blocking what God. So here's what I want to say to somebody, write this down. If you want to make sure that you're not putting limiting factors on the power of God in your life, I want to challenge you to tear down the fence. Tear down the fence. And I know that sounds easy, but it's not. I'm saying tear down because if you've ever tried to get rid of a fence in your life, it's like a full-on construction project. Come on, anybody got offended and you let it sit in there? The Bible calls it a root of bitterness because it takes seed in your life and it grows roots in your life. There's people been offended for years. You go back and ask them what they're doing. If they can't even remember the details of what happened in their life, some people, but it has taken such root in their life and it's poisoned their life. And I'm challenging somebody to take up a construction project today and tear down I'm telling somebody today that maybe you've been hurt by a spouse. I'm challenging you to forgive your spouse today. You've been hurt by the church. I want to encourage you to forgive the church. Today, listen to this. Harboring offense hinders the move of God in your life. The longer you let that offense in your life and it begins to take root and anybody, come on, be honest with me this morning. You've been offended, you know that hurt, it creeps into every area of your life. And you've been around people that are offended, it's like, it can't help it. It's coming up. And they literally, everything they talk about is through this filter of somebody hurt me, somebody pained me, and they've held on to it. And it's literally harboring that offense. You are hindering the move of God in your life. You're just like the people of Nazareth. God's wanting to do incredible things in your life, but you are limiting the power of God at work in your life. The second thing that we see about the people in Nazareth was part of the problem was that the people of Nazareth did not honor Jesus' presence. Part of the reason was their familiarity with Jesus. You've heard the phrase familiarity breeds contempt, right? This is what was happening with the people now. Remember, he went to his hometown. This is his homies right here. This is his crew. This is his boys. Like, this is the people he grew up with. But these people became so familiar with Jesus, they didn't honor his presence. Look what they said in verse 3. Well, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son? We're talking about Jesus, okay, by the way. God in flesh, and this is what they don't. Oh, that's the carpenter. He's Mary's son. He's the brother of James. You know, we know James, we know Judas, we know Simon, we know Joseph. He's just another one of his sisters. They're here among us. And so Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town among his relatives and his own home. We know we've all experienced this. The people that are closest to us obviously don't recognize and don't validate and appreciate our presence a lot of times, right? Those of you that are in your home, and you're at work and people are like, oh my God, you're so great. You know, you're out in the wherever and you're such a great father. You're an amazing man in your home and your kids are just like, man, you're such a bad dad. You don't do this, you don't do that. You're just another normal, average person, right? Because they've grown up with you. You're around all the time. This is what happened with the people of Nazareth. Jesus was around. He was family. This is his family. This is his closest friends, the people he was in closest proximity in relationship with. And they became so familiar with Jesus that they no longer honored his presence. Jesus saying a prophet is without honor in his own town. Nazareth is a very small town. In fact, historians say at that time, the town was probably only about 400 people. Now, I wasn't raised in a small town, but if you've ever talked to people that are raised in a small town, they tell you, everybody knows everybody in a town like that, right? And everybody talks about everybody. And this is the town Jesus is raised, small town, everybody knows. But they became so familiar with Jesus that they lost their honor for him. In psychology, there's a term called normalization. Normalization is when you take something that is extraordinary, and over time, and you're around it long enough, it just becomes normal. You normalize, like the internet first came out, right? Everybody was aghast, like, oh my God, like at the tip of my finger, I can access information, right? Oh my God, and all the incredible technological advances that we've had from the internet bursting on to the scene. It's this incredible thing, but today you don't even think about it. Some of you are on the internet right now. Right now, you're probably on Instagram or you're on Facebook. You're connected to our Wi-Fi here. You're on there right now. You don't even think anything of it. My kids, Drew's connected to he now through Xbox. He's on the internet. He plugs his Xbox in. He plays game. He's a Pokemon in or whatever it is, you know. And it's just normal to this generation. It's normalizing. This is what the city of Nazareth, they have God in flesh, Jesus, and this extraordinary, this has never happened before. God comes to earth in flesh and they've normalized him. And I know when I think of that, I'm like, man, if I would have been around in that time, whew, there's no way. Like Jesus is performing miracles all over the place, all over the map, literally all around Nazareth. Incredible things, blind see, lame walk, dead are raised, like incredible things. But they've normalized the presence of God. And you say, wow, man, if I would have been there in that day, there's no way I would have ever normalized it. But you know, the truth is, we normalize the presence of Jesus today. Honestly, we're in church this morning. We're in our worship service today. And the worship team was just singing. You could feel the presence of God this morning was here. And many of us, you know what some of us were doing? We were thinking about what we got to do with the job tomorrow. You're thinking about your schedule after work. And this, you know, we just take for granted now. The presence of God could be so strong. God wanting to do miracles amongst us. But the truth is, if we're not careful, we don't honor his presence. I want to say to somebody today, if you want to tear down one of the limiting factors of God working in your life and in your family, you've got to honor his presence. The next time you're in a small group, the scripture says where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I'll be in the midst there. And you're in a small group of people, right? You're at your home group and you're there and you got a couple of friends, you're talking. And if you're not careful, you can normalize that. Like, no. God may be wanting to do a miracle in if you've ever been a part of a small group, you've probably experienced some miracles in your small group, right? And you know why? Because we're not just gonna normalize you could be on your job and all of a sudden you're praying, you're in your car and the presence of God. And if you're not careful, something that's so extraordinary, the presence of God. The Bible says where the presence of the Lord is, there's liberty. Like miracles happen in the presence of God. And if we're not careful, we just normalize something extraordinary and it just becomes like, it's normal. Yeah, it's Sunday morning. We come in, we worship, we leave, check that off our checklist. I want to say to somebody today, could it be that your attitude, your lack of reverence, your lack of respect for the presence of God could be limiting? It could be a limiting factor in the supernatural work of God to full effect in your life. In fact, this wasn't something new. This has been happening for thousands of years. And Jesus, in Luke chapter 4, this is his second visit back to Nazareth. He comes to the village of Nazareth, again, Luke chapter 4, verse 16. It's his boyhood home, and he went, as usual, to the synagogue on the Sabbath. He stood up to read the scriptures. The scroll of Isaiah, the prophet, was handed to him, and he unrolls the scroll. He found the place where it was written. Now watch this. Jesus is about to repeat a prophecy from hundreds of years ago that would tell of the Messiah coming. Okay, this was the moment that Israel had been waiting for. The Messiah was finally coming. Jesus gets up and he begins to read. This is one of the most powerful passages of scripture, all of the gospels right here. This is Jesus's mission statement in the world, right here, summed up in these next couple of verses. He's in Nazareth. Right? This is the hometown. Like, that's where you want to come out and declare, right? Like, this is my mission. Like, imagine when the president, they make their big speech that they're going to enter into the race. They're very particular about where they make that announcement. Jesus is going to make the announcement of his mission in the world in Nazareth. And he begins to repeat the words of the prophet. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to, watch this, he's gonna bring good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, the blind will see, and the oppressed will be set free. Jesus is describing everything he's about to do. The miracles are about to proceed his mission in the world, in Nazareth. Like this should have been the epicenter of Jesus's ministry. If anywhere good news should have came to the poor, it should have been in Nazareth. There should have not been one blind person in Nazareth. Come on, somebody. There should have not been one captive left in Nazareth when this was his hometown. But then in verse 23, he said, you will undoubtedly quote me this proverb, physician, heal yourself, meaning, watch this, do miracles in your hometown like those you did in Capernaum. Verse 24, but I tell you the truth. He says it again. He's already told them this once. No prophet is accepted in his own hometown. And so because of their lack of respect and reverence and awe for Jesus's presence, Jesus' power is limited in Nazareth. This is so sad. This is so sad. I would hate for God's power to be limited in your life because you lost a reverence and an awe and a respect for the promise or for the presence of God. So then in verse 25, he sums up his conversation with them. Watch this. He says, he's telling them this is nothing new. This has been happening for hundreds of years. He said, certainly there were many needy widows in Israel in Elijah's time. He's going back a couple hundred times, and Elijah was the prophet to Israel. He says, certainly there were many needy widows in Israel in Elijah's time when the heavens were closed for 3.5 years and there was this severe famine that devastated the land. So he's going back to a time when God actually caused the heavens to shut up and he causes a famine to come into Israel. And he says, yet Elijah was not sent to any of them. You would think if God was going to supernaturally provide in the midst of a famine, it would have been for one of the widows in Israel, but he doesn't. Instead, he goes to a foreigner, a widow of Zarephath in the land of Sidon. This is so sad. The home team, all right? Israel, we know that Abraham is the father of our faith, and from Abraham comes the nation of Israel. This is God's chosen people. God says, I'm gonna create a family in the world, and I'm gonna display my glory and reveal myself to the world through this. This is my family, the children of Israel. And if anywhere there should have been miracles happening during that 3.5 years of famine, it should have been some widows in Israel, but he doesn't perform a miracle there in Israel. He has to go to another widow, a foreigner, somebody that's outside the tribe of Israel. And there he does. He said, many in Israel had leprosy in the time of the prophet Elisha. Elisha is the predecessor for Elijah as the prophet to Israel, God's people. And there's many in Israel at Elisha's time, and they had leprosy. But there's only one that was healed, and it was Naaman. He's a Syrian. He's not an Israelite. He's a Syrian. Jesus is trying to say that God's people didn't honor his presence. And because of that, there was these limiting factors that were placed on the power of God working in their life. How sad. All these widows in Israel, and yet God performs a widow for the woman in Zarephath. How sad that all these people with leprosy in Israel that should have received healing. Again, it's not that God has limited power, that its power has been limited. And so he performs a miracle of healing the leper in his name, and it's a centurion. This is sad, and yet it's also good. It's sad that the children of Israel, God's people, that even today, Christians, God's family, that sometimes we don't personally experience the miracles of God, but it's also good news in that if you're a foreigner, if you're from Syria, if you're not a part of this church, if you're not a Christian today, if you're not a Christ follower today, you know what the good news is that you have just as much access to the power, the supernatural power of God working in your life than anybody else does today. Yeah, I've come to tell somebody today, you may not even believe in Jesus today. You may be here and you're just checking things out and you don't know if you believe in God. And I want you to know that the same supernatural power that we experience is available to you today. This is sad, yet it's exciting. I want to say to somebody, write this down. I want to say, honor his presence. Honor his presence. Thirdly, to unblock the flow of Jesus' power in our life. Number 3, write this down. We have to expect the unexpected. We have to expect. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Too often, I think we allow logic to get in the way of expecting great miraculous things from God. And I think, and I know this may go against your view, so just give me a second here. I think sometimes our logic blocks and hinders the work of God in our life. If we're not careful, our logic, this is what the people in Nazareth were doing. Let me tell you what they're doing. They were putting Jesus in a box. They had certain expectations for Jesus. And if Jesus didn't operate the way that they thought he should operate, if he didn't stay inside this box that they had created for him, then they were offended. They lost honor for him. They lost any expectation of him doing supernatural things. And in fact, to take it further, they became skeptical. They scoffed at Jesus. You read the 2 different times that he went to, they're scoffing at Jesus. They get angry at Jesus because he's not doing things the way that he should. If he's truly the Messiah, he wouldn't look this way. Watch in John chapter 7. This is John's vantage point. Jesus, he's talking to the people of Nazareth again. This is what they say to him. Watch this. We know where this man is from. Pay careful attention to this. When the Messiah comes, this is Nazareth. This is the people that should have recognized Jesus. The Jews are the ones that Jesus came to. He came to his own, but his own rejected him. They didn't receive him. He's talking to his own. And you know what they said? Well, we know where this man's from. Remember? He's the carpenter. He's from Nazareth. He's just one of the brothers of Judas and Joseph and Simon. But when the Messiah comes, now they're going to give you their knowledge of Jesus and who the Messiah is and how he's going to arrive on the scene. When he comes, no one will know where he's from. Jesus still teaching the temple courts. He cried out, he said, yes, watch this. You know me. You know where I'm from. I'm not here on my own authority, but he who sent me is here, and you do not know him. If we are not careful, write this down, sometimes we allow what we know to blind us to what could be known. Let me say that again. Sometimes we allow what we know. Some of you, you've got an incredible understanding, academic understanding of Jesus. You can probably memorize the Gospels by now. You know every word that he said. He said, you know me. You know where I'm from. Jesus is saying, you know about me, but you don't really know me. You have an intellectual, academic understanding of who Jesus is, but sometimes I think what we know blinds us to what could be known. It blinds us to that deeper understanding of who Jesus, that deeper supernatural, spiritual understanding, personal understanding of who Jesus is. And so some of us, we've put Jesus in a box today. In fact, that's the reason some of us get offended at God. It's because, again, we've put these expectations. We know how Jesus is we're asking Jesus to do things in our life, but we put parameters around how he's gonna do it. He's gonna show up this way in my life, and we believe God can do miracles in life, but he's gonna do it this way and that way. And can I tell you, when Jesus comes onto the scene, he defies all your logic. Come on, Jesus that's the way Jesus has always been about defying people's expectations. And then he sums it up and he says in verse 6, he was amazed. This is so sad. This is the eulogy of Nazareth, Jesus' hometown. He said he was amazed at their lack of faith. He's amazed. Jesus can't do miracles in Nazareth because of their lack of faith. Let me just say, that doesn't necessarily mean that if God doesn't give you what you ask for, it's because you don't have enough faith. I've heard people say, well, you just don't have enough faith or you don't pray enough. There are times, let me just give a disclaimer, sometimes you didn't get your miracle because maybe God has something better for you. Or God knows what you need is not, what you're asking for is not what you need. But sometimes it's a lack of faith. And I don't know about you, but I would hate for my lack of faith to be the reason that God was unable to do a miracle in my life. I would hate that it was a lack of faith that my child wasn't healed, that my relationship wasn't restored. I would hate for the eulogy of my life to be that Jesus was amazed at their lack of faith. This is what is written about Nazareth today. It's not just Nazareth, Jesus' own family. It wasn't just his friends, his neighbors, his own family. John 7 says even his own brothers did not believe him. James, the brothers that were mentioned, these were the people that were there. Like they saw firsthand what Jesus was doing, the supernatural miracles, the incredible wisdom that Jesus is speaking from, and his own brothers. I'm talking to Christ followers today. Somewhere along the line, you have lost your faith. And I don't know about you, but I don't want that to be my eulogy. That God looks down and is like, look at everything I was doing in the world. Look at the miracles. You've got my word written. You can literally read my teachings. You know the incredible wisdom that spews forth off of the pages, and yet you still lack. I'm telling you, some of you here right now, under the sound of my voice, watching online, you are doubting God in your life today after everything that you've seen and heard God do. And I'm wondering today if God's looking down at our lives and is saying, I'm amazed. That word amazed literally means shocked. Jesus is shocked. Are you kidding me? I'm saying to somebody today that you've got an obstacle in your way. You've got a sick family member. You've got a relationship that's shattered. You got some hopes and dreams that have been shattered in your life. Your finances are a mess, and you don't have the faith to believe that God can do a miracle in your life, that God can open the blind eyes, that God can release the captives. Come on, somebody, that God can do the supernatural work in your life. And God's saying, I'm shocked. After everything I've done, and you still, his own family doesn't believe him. That's the bad news. The good news is you can do a U-turn today. You can do a U-turn. Because here's why I know that. Because one of those brothers of Jesus that didn't believe him after everything he saw and he lacked, Jesus is amazed at his lack. One of his brothers was a brother we read about. His name was James. And James, if you follow the life of Jesus through the book of Acts, which records the early church history, if you follow James's story, James is there on the day of Pentecost when for the first time the Holy Spirit is poured out into the upper room. There's 120 people there, and guess who one of the people is? James is there. You fast forward to Acts chapter 15, and James is sitting on the council. He's like one of the board members of the church, and they're starting to usher in that the gospel needs to progress, not just to Jews, but it needs to go to Gentiles. This was taboo at this time. Like it was only supposed to be for us and the family, and God's breaking down all the barriers, and he's saying, no, the gospel's got to go to the Gentiles, and James is there, and he's advocating for the Gentiles. Fast forward and we start to read about James's life. James is not just a board member of the church. James becomes the leader of the church in Jerusalem. He's now leading the church from Jerusalem, which is the epicenter for the work of Jesus happening in the world. Galatians chapter 2 tells us that James becomes a pillar for the church internationally. Now, I want you to read James's words in James chapter 1, verse 6. James says, now, when you ask, you must believe. Somewhere along the line, James lost faith in Jesus. And the truth is, every one of us here, you may have experienced the miraculous of God, and you've been around miracles. You may have been raised in church, and you've seen supernatural, but somewhere along the line, James, either he got offended, he stopped honoring God's presence, or he had just put Jesus in a box. That's just, he's one of us. But James, something shifted, and now James is telling the church, listen to me, when you ask, you must believe and do not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. James, I'm saying to somebody here today that you can make a U-turn. And you may have lost hope, you may have lost faith, you may have lost the ability to believe God for the supernatural in your life. But if you're here today and you need a miracle from Jesus today, listen to our brother James. He was one time a doubter, but somewhere all along the line, faith began to rise up in his life, and he started to, I'm saying to somebody, you need to believe again. You need to dream again. You need to start expecting the unexpected. You need to start expecting God to do the impossible and supernatural in your life. You've got to expect the unexpected. This was the problem with the Jews. This was the problem with the people in Nazareth. This was the problem with the nation of Israel. When Jesus came, people were shocked by Jesus. They were shocked. He didn't meet their expectations, and they shouldn't have been, because their expectations were set too low for what Jesus was gonna do. God's supernatural intervention shouldn't shock us. It shouldn't shock us when somebody's healed of cancer. It shouldn't shock us when people are delivered miraculously from addictions. It shouldn't shock us when God supernaturally shows up and provides our financial needs. It shouldn't shock you when your family members who are away from God and you start to pray for them and they receive salvation. Come on, church, that shouldn't shock us. We ought to be expecting the unexpected. We're talking about God, the creator of the universe, the one that spoke the worlds into existence, the one that specializes in the impossible. We shouldn't be shocked. We ought to be like today, right now, this morning, we ought to be expecting that God's about to do miracles in our midst today. Like, I'm believing today people are gonna be healed, people are gonna be saved, people are gonna be delivered. I woke up this morning and I'm expecting the unexpected. See, they didn't expect Jesus to be born in Bethlehem. They didn't expect him to be raised in Nazareth. They didn't expect him to be the carpenter's son. They didn't expect that. They didn't expect that shepherds and pagan magicians would broadcast his arrival. They didn't expect years later that he would appear as this itinerant rabbi that we've been studying, and the school of disciples that was comprised of fishermen and tax collectors, zealots, the outcasts of society. And let me tell you, no one expected him to actually raise from the dead on the third day. But I've just come to expect the unexpected. And that's why today I'm expecting him. I'm expecting him right now to go into the hospital room of one of our Verve family members, an older man right now who's in the hospital. You know what, and the doctors told him this week, they gave him a bad report. He told me he has bone cancer. They didn't expect him, but you know what? I'm expecting the unexpected. God, I'm expecting you right now to go into that hospital room and raise him up and heal him of that bone cancer today. I know this week, we were in staff meeting this week, and it was so overwhelming. We take time in our staff meeting and we listen to the needs of some of you right here, members of the church. And staff meeting this Wednesday, it was overwhelming. All of a sudden, man, our staff started sharing the needs of people. And in fact, I'm gonna be honest with you, it was so overwhelming. I literally felt like, oh my God, our church is under attack right now. There were so many, I felt the weight. Sonia stopped everybody. She said, we're gonna pray right now. And I loved it. You know what we were saying? We're gonna expect the unexpected. Some of you got bad doctor's report this week. Some of you thought your relationships were over this week. Some of you have had some family issues and you think it's your demise of your family this week. Some of you have got some news this week financially that you think is about to devastate you. But I don't know about you. This is why I've just come to expect the unexpected. I'm expecting for God to walk into some of your lives this morning and do a miracle and turn things upside down. I'm expecting the miraculous to happen in anybody else today. You just want to expect anybody want to just take the boundaries that you put off of God in your life, the little box that you've put him in, and you want to pull away that box and say, God, I'm giving you free reign to do what you want, how you want, when you want. I want you to perform the miraculous in my life. I'm expecting God to comfort the family members of this church that have lost a child. I'm expecting God right now. God, I want you to send comfort, peace that passes understanding, the supernatural type of peace that no one can describe, that doesn't make sense. God, I'm expecting the unexpected. Every doctor report that you've received this week or recently that tells you that there's no hope, you know what? I'm expecting God to do the unexpected. This is where I expect God to show up. They didn't expect him to show up in a stable, in a manger, because you know why? They don't expect God to show up in the deep, dark, painful spots of your life. But let me tell you something, that's where Jesus shows up. You've got to expect that God's gonna show up in the unexpected places and the unexpected times in your life, and God's gonna do a miracle. Only 2 times that Jesus was amazed. I'm over time, give me 5 minutes, I promise. Only 2 times that Jesus was amazed, where he was shocked, surprised. One, he's amazed at their lack of faith. The other time was Jesus came upon a centurion whose daughter was sick. And he came and he got Jesus' attention, and Jesus said, okay, I'll go with you to your house today, and I'm gonna perform your miracle in your daughter. And the centurion said, oh no, you don't even need to go to the house. I just need you to speak the word. I'm a man of authority, and I know how this works, and you're a man of authority. I just need you to speak the word. They'd already come to him and told him, your daughter's dead. She's not gonna make it. But he said, I understand who you are. And Jesus stopped, and the Bible says he was amazed. He was amazed at his faith. That's the kind of amazement I want to cause God to have today, this Sunday morning. I want God to look down, and although the doctor said it was over and they told us our child was dead, listen, sir, your child is dead. There's no reason for you to bother the master anymore. But that man just kept going, no, you don't understand this man. This man's different. This man can do the supernatural. And Jesus was amazed at his faith. That's the type of I want to get the attention. I want to shock God today. That no matter how bleak or devastating it looks right now, that I'm gonna believe Jesus is gonna do supernatural. That God is gonna perform a miracle. I want you to stand with me this morning. Some of you today, it's time to tear down the fence. Listen, I know this may sound strong today. You've been offended for too long. You have held on to that hurt and that unforgiveness too long, and you are restricting the flow of God's power in your life. And I'm saying to you right now, start a construction project on your heart today. And you start ripping up the fence. I know you were hurt. I know you were innocent. You didn't deserve it. I know your expectations weren't met. But for your sake, for the sake of what God's wanting to do in your life today, I'm telling you, tear down the fence. If you've got a spouse that you're offended at, I want you to forgive them right now. You got parents or children that have hurt you, close your eyes. I want you to forgive them right now. I feel like God could do an incredible work right now if we tore down the fence, the hurt and the pain that you've experienced. And I'm not making less, listen, I'm not making less of what you've experienced. I'm just telling you, you've held on to it so long, it's eating away at your life and it's stopping the flow of God's presence in your life. If you're here today and maybe you're a Christ follower and you've just become so accustomed to God's presence, you've normalized something that's so extraordinary that we're standing in God's house today, I want to challenge you right now to get an awe, of reverence, a respect for the present. God told Moses when there's a burning bush, Moses looked over, Moses was gonna go over and touch that bush, and God stopped him and said, Moses, you need to take off your shoes. You're standing on, I want you to know right now in this service, in your home right now, the presence of God, you may be driving in your car, wherever you're at right now, you are on holy ground. The presence of God right now is in our midst. And we can't become so familiar with it that we just normalize that. No, where the Spirit of God is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of God is, miracles happen. How about we just find a deep reverence and respect and awe for the presence of the Holy One, the God of Israel, the Creator, the all-powerful One. That's who's here today. That's who we're honoring and respect. I'm telling you, out of that deep reverence comes a revelation that God could do incredible things in my life. And lastly, I'm saying to every one of us, along the line, we've lost faith. We've lost our faith. I'm saying to somebody today, find it within yourself to believe right now. And I'll echo the words of our brother James. Close your eyes right now. If you're gonna ask, you ask in faith. If you ask anything today, and here's what I want to say, we're gonna ask God today for miracles. We're not just gonna ask, we're gonna believe. I want you right now, this is the way I pray. Listen, I'm gonna tell you how I do it. You do it your way. When I start praying for God to do things, I literally start to envision. God speaks to me through images, and I start to picture God already performing the miracle in my life. And I want you to keep your eyes closed. I want you to imagine right now, Ephesians 3:20 says that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask or imagine. I want you to see God right now at work in whatever miracle you need. We're gonna pray believing, we're gonna pray expecting that today. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Anybody need a miracle? Raise your hand right now. You need a miracle this morning. Come on, raise your hand. Raise it high. Come on, we're praying and believing today. Anybody believe that God can do that miracle right now? I want our prayer partners to come up to the front right now. We're gonna pray together and we're gonna believe. We're gonna honor the presence of God and we're gonna expect God to do miracles right now. If you need God to do a miracle, I want you to come up to the front when you find a prayer partner. And we're gonna believe, we're gonna pray together. We're gonna pray because sometimes you may not have the faith. And I want you to rely on the faith of another brother or sister this morning that has the faith to believe with you. And we're gonna expect the unexpected. That song said, this is a house of miracles. That's where we're at today. We're in a house where miracles, this is the day. Father, I just pray right now, you see every need. I know, because I can feel the weight of the needs that are pressing in our church this morning, God. People that are sick. You know what? I expect God to show up in the panic attack, the anxiety attack that some of you are dealing with right now. I'm expecting God to show up. People that are sick, people that have lack, people dealing with mental health issues today, God. people dealing with offense, pain. Right now, God, we are expecting. Come on, would you start to expect right now? Come on, start to envision it right now. Just look at, see it. See God going to work right now in your situation. We're gonna sing this song again as we do. I want you to find one of these prayer partners. And church, can we set an atmosphere for God to work this morning? Can we create an atmosphere of faith? We may even I want to shock God today that there's still a group of people that we believe that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day, and that Jesus has been given all power in heaven and earth, and today, whatever you need, God's going to perform.